When a host tried to confront Elon Musk, Musk's response was not only blunt but also revealing. The atmosphere in the studio was charged with tension, a palpable electricity that could be cut with a knife. The camera's red light flashed, indicating the start of a live broadcast. The liberal talk show host, known for his provocative and no-holds-barred style, leaned forward, locking eyes with Musk. Elon Musk, dressed in a simple dark blazer, stood calmly, his hands resting casually on his lap. His presence dominated the room, and the air was thick with anticipation as the audience waited to see how the billionaire inventor would handle the host's provocative questions. "Mr. Musk," the host began, his voice firm but challenging. "You've been called many things: visionary, disruptor, even controversial. Yet some critics say your business practices and recent political views raise serious ethical questions. How do you respond to those who accuse you of putting profits over people?" Musk tilted his head slightly, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He paused before answering, his eyes sweeping around the studio as if he were calculating the impact of his words. "Hey, everyone. Just a quick moment. I hope you're enjoying this story as much as I'm enjoying telling it. Bringing these incredible personalities to you is a true passion of mine. Each story is a piece of our rich American heritage, and I love sharing it with all of you. But to continue bringing more of these inspiring stories, I really need your help. If you like what you're seeing, please consider subscribing to the channel. By clicking that subscribe button, you'll be helping me reach more people and continue sharing these stories we love so much. And don't forget to give this video a like. Each like is a small show of support that motivates me to bring more quality content to you. Together, we can keep the memory of these personalities who shape our nation alive. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with me. Let's continue this journey together, exploring the stories that make the USA such a special place. Now, let's get back to our story and discover more about this fascinating personality. "I think it's fair for people to ask questions," he said, his voice low but clear. "However, asking questions is not the same as assuming bad intentions. If we're going to talk about ethics, perhaps we should start by asking who controls the narrative and why." The host backed away, momentarily disconcerted by Musk's response. "Are you suggesting there's a bigger issue at play here, beyond your own actions?" he asked, trying to regain control of the interview. Musk nodded, his tone firm but filled with unexpected gravity. "Absolutely. What worries me is not just the criticism, but the control of information. The way narratives are shaped to guide public perception. That's where the real danger lies." The studio seemed frozen in time. Production assistants reached for their phones, realizing the interview was taking an unexpected turn. Musk wasn't just defending himself. He was steering the conversation into uncharted waters. The host quickly regained his composure, his journalistic instincts kicking in. "Mr. Musk, let's get to the main point. We're talking about your decisions, like the job cuts at your companies, your controversial stances on free speech, and even your questionable alliances. Are you suggesting that the scrutiny you're facing is part of an orchestrated narrative?" Musk leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed but his gaze intense. "I'm suggesting that what people believe is often shaped not by what is true, but by what they are told to believe. Let's look at the media today. How often do you see balanced reporting? How often are voices that challenge the status quo silenced or labeled as controversial?" The presenter raised an eyebrow. "So you're presenting yourself as a victim of media manipulation?" "It's not just me," Musk replied calmly. "It's bigger than me. The question is not whether I'm a victim. The question is who decides what you believe, what you're allowed to question. When information is controlled, freedom dies. It's that simple." The host exhaled deeply, trying to keep the conversation under control. "That's a valid comment, but let's be honest. People have real concerns about their platforms. Misinformation spreads like wildfire. Don't you think some controls are needed to prevent harm?" Musk smiled slightly. "Whose control? Who decides what is disinformation? I can tell you it's not as clear-cut as people think. When you give a small group the power to determine the truth, you hand them a weapon that can be used to suppress dissent, stifle innovation, control minds." The host seemed to hesitate for a moment, his carefully prepared questions beginning to crumble under the weight of Musk's counterarguments. The audience, both in the studio and at home, could sense the shift in the dynamic. This wasn't just an interview. It was turning into a battle of ideologies. Musk continued, his voice dropping to a measured tone, each word deliberate. "Herein lies the real danger. When powerful media and institutions align, they create an illusion of consensus. They don't just control the story, they control reality. And that's where freedom isn't just in danger, it's already gone." The host shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That sounds like a conspiracy theory, Mr. Musk. Are you saying there's a coordinated effort to manipulate the world? I'm saying there's a system in place, and it's not designed for transparency or accountability, Musk responded. Let me give you an example. How many times have we seen stories published, only to be debunked weeks, months, even years later? The damage is already done. People don't remember the correction. They remember the lie. And those who spread those lies rarely face consequences. The audience was silent, the camera zooming in to capture the tension in the presenter's expression. But isn't that why platforms like yours, social media, are under scrutiny? You allow unverified information to spread. Doesn't that make you part of the problem? Musk's response was swift and calm, his words carrying weight. Scrutiny is important, but it must be reciprocal. When governments, corporations, and the media work together to label dissent as misinformation, it's not about truth. It's about control. That's why free speech matters, even when it's messy. Because the alternative is so much worse. The presenter's confidence began to waver, his carefully constructed arguments struggling to hold up under Musk's relentless logic. You're painting a very dystopian picture, Mr. Musk. Are you saying there's no hope for balance? For accountability? Musk looked directly at the presenter, his eyes shining with determination. There is hope, but it starts with people questioning what they are told, not just accepting it because it comes from a trusted source. We need to be vigilant. We need to demand transparency. And we need to remember that freedom is not something we are given. It is something we fight to keep. The weight of Musk's words hung in the air. The host seemed momentarily unsure of what to say. His defiant expression was replaced by thoughtful gravity, but the silence didn't last long. Musk had more to say, and what followed forced the audience to confront some uncomfortable truths. Musk leaned forward, his posture changing from conversational to resolute. Let me show you what I mean. Take the recent controversies surrounding whistleblowers. People who risk everything to expose corruption or manipulation. How are they treated? They are vilified. Their credibility is destroyed. And the institutions they expose? They go unpunished. The host tried to interrupt, but Musk raised his hand slightly, not in dismissal, but as a subtle gesture for him to hold back his rebuttal. Let's look at surveillance programs. Years ago, people thought government surveillance of citizens was a paranoid fantasy. Then we had the leaks. We learned how deep it really was. But instead of outrage leading to accountability, it became normalized. Now people tune out. They say this is just the way it is. And that's the problem. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. The audience, both in the studio and at home, was hanging on every syllable. Musk raised his hands again, his tone dropping slightly. Or take the news you see every day. Have you noticed how certain narratives dominate while others are suppressed? Stories that don't fit the preferred agenda are ignored, discredited, or labeled as misinformation. The host took a deep breath, visibly struggling to redirect the conversation. But isn't it the job of journalists to check facts? To provide accurate information? Are you saying we shouldn't have guardians of the truth? Musk's response was measured but firm. Fact-checking is vital, but only when it's impartial. What we have now is not fact-checking, it's selective strangulation. You don't have to silence everyone to control a narrative. You just have to silence enough to make dissent seem isolated. That's how you manufacture consensus. The host finally found an opening, leaning forward with his own intensity. But doesn't your own platform contribute to this chaos? Aren't you part of the problem you're criticizing? Musk paused, acknowledging the point. Social media isn't perfect, but it's also one of the few places where people can still challenge the narrative. At least for now. The solution isn't more censorship, it's more transparency. If we start policing ideas, we lose innovation. And when innovation dies, so does progress. The room grew louder again, the weight of the discussion palpable. The presenter glanced down at his notes, but seemed hesitant to continue. Musk seized the moment. His voice grew softer, but no less intense. How much of what you believe is something you've actually questioned? And how much is something you've been told to believe? But before the host could respond, Musk shifted the conversation again, directing it toward the profound implications of covert control and its impact on the future of humanity. The host glanced nervously at the teleprompter, his confidence visibly shaken. The direction of the interview had veered completely off course, and the atmosphere in the studio had changed. It wasn't just tense, it was electric. Even the studio staff, usually indifferent to the interviewees they were watching, seemed transfixed. The soft sound of rustling papers and the hum of overhead lights were the only noises breaking the heavy silence. Mr. Musk, The host began, his voice wavering slightly. You paint a very bleak picture of our society. But isn't this narrative of control and manipulation just a way to distract from your own controversies? People are telling you that your ideas and decisions have consequences, things you seem to ignore. Musk's gaze didn't waver. He spoke calmly, his words carrying a weight that seemed to press down on the room. Criticism is fair. Accountability is necessary. But the question isn't whether I made mistakes. We all do. The question is, who benefits when we're too distracted by controversy to see the bigger picture? Look around us. The erosion of privacy, the consolidation of power, the suppression of voices that don't align with a particular narrative. These aren't random accidents. They're symptoms of a system that prioritizes control over truth. The host backed away, her frustration evident. She was a professional, used to controlling the narrative. But Musk had broken the rules and was not about to give in. So what do you propose? The host asked, his voice somber. That we trust billionaires like you to protect the truth? Isn't that just trading one kind of power for another? Musk leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Trust isn't the answer. Transparency is. No one should have disproportionate power. Not governments, not corporations, not individuals. The solution isn't to silence those who disagree. It's to create systems where truth can flourish, even when it's inconvenient. The host stepped back, clearly pondering his next move. But the tension in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. That sounds more like a warning than a conversation, Mr. Musk. It's a warning, Musk said softly, his tone almost empathetic now. Because if we don't confront these problems, it's not just freedom. It's the future of innovation, progress, and the essence of what makes us human. The words hung in the air like an echo. For the first time, the presenter seemed genuinely at a loss as to how to proceed. His gaze flicked to the audience, as if searching for some semblance of control. But the expression he found reflected his own uncertainty, confusion, curiosity, even fear. After the tension reached a fever pitch, Musk delivered a final thought that shifted the focus from the present to the consequences that awaited humanity if these patterns continued unchecked. Musk shifted his stance, his expression pained but not losing its intensity. He glanced briefly at the cameras, almost as if he were addressing each viewer personally. Here's the reality, he began, his voice softer now but resonating deeply. Every decision we make, every piece of information we consume, shapes the world we leave behind. The question isn't just about power or control, it's about responsibility. Are we willing to question the narratives that have been imposed on us? Are we willing to demand more, not just from our leaders and institutions, but from ourselves? The presenter leaned back in his chair, visibly disarmed. His defiant posture had been replaced by something unfamiliar: introspection. For the first time, he seemed less focused on winning the argument and more on understanding the gravity of what had been said. Mr. Musk, he said after a long pause, you've raised some important points, but what do you want people to take away from this? What action should they take? Musk's lips pressed into a thin line, his expression thoughtful. I'm not here to tell people what to think, he said finally, but I want them to think. I want them to think. It morphed into something much deeper, a moment of collective recognition. The end credits began to roll, but Musk lined up with the camera one last time, his expression serious. If you've made it this far, he said, his voice softer but no less impactful, take a moment to ask yourself, who controls what you believe? And, more importantly, are you willing to find out? The screen faded to black, leaving viewers across the country sitting in silence. Musk's assessment wasn't just about systems of power or media manipulation. It was a call to action, a challenge to see beyond the surface and take ownership of one's beliefs. Because in the end, the most dangerous thing is not the loss of truth, but the loss of the will to seek it. If this story made you think, share your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation that matters. And if you believe in questioning the narrative and seeking the truth, subscribe to the channel. Together, we can keep asking the hard questions.